Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. This week, folks, we are going to be presenting a lecture by a gentleman by the name of John Anesworth. And what John is going to be speaking about particularly is the era that you would know as the Reconstructionist era during and post-Civil War. I think you will find a lot of this information startling because of the information is truth. It's not fabricated reasoning, and what you're going to discover is that, number one, the real reason for the Civil War, it wasn't to free the black people from slavery, and also you're going to discover that the winner of the Civil War wasn't the North. Obviously, the loser was the South, but the winner of the Civil War, folks, was Washington, D.C., the federalization of our republic into a federalized democracy. I think you're going to find this very interesting. Pay attention to his language and take notes, sit back and enjoy, and we'll see you on the end of it. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, what we want to look at in getting into what we're doing here is why are we here? Why is this group of people in this room today? And what it is, we're seeing our country just being taken away from us. The information I'm going to show you today is really a primer. Okay, this is just to try to give you a fundamental, fairly hard slamming fundamental understanding of why things were taken away. I can't get real heavy into how we get them back. It really takes about 12, 16 hours of seminar to go through this and going through all the legal arguments and things of that nature, which we don't have. I'm willing to stay here as long as we need tonight. You know, whatever people want to do, I'm here for you to help out. But we've got to figure out what happened in America, and there's only one thing that happened in America that we've got to figure out. We got Americans today that are scrambling out there, the Patriot movement. I've been involved in it for 20 years, and looking and trying to figure out what's wrong in America and how we got to where we are. And we've got a window of opportunity right now that since the election of 2008 has given an awakening to a lot of Americans, and seeing the rapid slide to socialism, the rapid slide of immorality. You know, just think in your mind. Again, just think in your mind. You know, picture a graph and the direction America has gone in morally in the last 50 years. Okay, what direction is that graph pointing in?
Down.
I mean, down. Think of how we're doing fiscally, monetarily. Last 50 years. What are we doing? We're destroying ourselves. How many of you believe that if you vote the right person, then we can change those two directions?
It takes a number of different people.
They're going in the wrong direction. Even if you get the right people in, and I've got bumper stickers over here, which is voting is not the answer, because most people say you got to vote, you got to exercise your right to vote. It's a stopgap, but it's not the answer. It's a way to slow things down until the people can get educated enough. Now, what I'm going to show you tonight, I'm going to show you, and I feel very comfortable. I've got $10,000 on it. I'm right. If anybody can believe, and what I'm going to do is show the state of North Carolina. I'm going to prove the state of North Carolina is an unlawful, illegal state. In the same vein, I'm actually doing the same argument for Vermont and New York and every other state. This is not a North Carolina. This is not a Southern argument. What it's going to take is us learning what the problem is, and then number two, doing something about it. We had a body politic in this country, a political body of Americans who said that we don't believe in tyranny, we believe in freedom. And that political body set up this country as we know it, or as we knew it. And that body has been sitting on their hands and saying, you know what? I'm Christian. We don't argue with people. We don't debate. We don't mix politics with religion. We don't. And you know what? There's highly motivated groups of people out there who say, you know what? if they don't care about their country and standing up for it, I'll take it. You got the socialists, you got the atheists, you got the illegals, you got the gay movement. These people are in the streets saying, you know what? They don't want it. Saying, you guys don't want your government. You've abdicated. You're doing nothing. You're not willing to stand in the street and do something about it. And what I want to do is give you the tools to where you can confidently stand up, because that's been the missing link, is we stand up but we don't even know what the problem is. We don't know how we got here. And so we don't know what we're standing up for. We don't know what the enemy is. Truth is our friend. Deception is our enemy. What we want to do is bring truth to the world of what in the world happened. And that's what I want to show you, and this is where we're going to start this. But at the end of this, I don't want this to be just another nice meeting. I want to see people who, if you believe this, if this is the truth, I want to see people who are doing something about it. Not saying, man, that John Anesworth gives a nice talk. I don't want that. I don't want applause. I don't want me doing a nice talk. I want you getting your state back. That's what I want. But let's just begin here. This is a U.S. Supreme Court case from 1950, Communications Association versus Dowds. And it says, progress generally begins in skepticism about accepted truths. Intellectual freedom means the right to re-examine much that has been long taken for granted. A free man must be a reasoning man, and he must dare to doubt what a legislative or electoral majority may most passionately assert. The danger that citizens may think wrongly is serious, but less dangerous than atrophy from not thinking at all. And I think that's where America's been for a long time. We're not thinking. Right. You know, what do they say? He who believes in nothing will fall for what? Anything. Whatever comes along, because I don't have a belief system. You show me something pretty, something good, I'll believe it. Well, no, we got to get back to when we know who we are and stand on what we believe, rather than being told what we believe is wrong and racist or bigoted or whatever they want to do so that they can move their agenda, whoever they are, forward. It says our Constitution relies on our electorate's complete ideological freedom to nourish independent and responsible intelligence and preserve our democracy from that submissiveness, timidity, and herd-mindedness of the masses, which would foster a tyranny of mediocrity. The priceless heritage of our society is the unrestricted constitutional right of each member to think as he will. Thought control is a copyright of totalitarianism. Isn't political correctness thought control? Yeah. You can't think that. Don't think that. Don't say that. And it's a way to get you to self-censor. Oh, I can't say that because people will jump on it. So thought control is a copyright of totalitarianism. And this is what we're in today. And we have no claim to it. It is not the function of our government to keep the citizen from falling into error. It is the function of the citizen to keep the government from falling into error. Whose job is it to fix this? Ours. What's the definition of a state? A state is composed of three parts. What's the number one part of a state?
The people.
The people. The people is the state. Okay, but to make a state recognized, it's got to have three parts. Number one, the people, a political body with a common belief. Geographic. It's got to be. They have to have a boundaries, land and boundaries. And what's the third part? They create a government to govern themselves. The government is not the state. The government wants to let you believe they are the state, but you are the state. And it's real important that we understand this. The legal definition of a state is a people over a geographic area organized under a government. Like us. If we just decide, you know what, this group of people, we're tired of what's going on out there. You know, Ken's got some land or bought an island in Bermuda, and we can make it our country. What's the first thing we're going to do once we get there? Organize a government of some sort. When someone does something wrong, who has a right to punish him or do something? We're going to set up some rules. Or are we going to set up that government to oppress us? Hey, let's go set up a government that's just going to, just like take everything of ours. No. You set up a government for the benefit of the people. The people set up a government for the benefit of the people. The government today, is it there for the benefit of the American people?
No.
No. It's abdicated what it's doing. It's not operating in the position of a government anymore.
Crime Incorporated.
I don't do the corporation. If you go to Bouvier's, a government is a corporation.
Yeah.
Under the Constitution, it was a corporation.
That was his Crime
The original.
Incorporated.
Well, now it's just changed. Yeah, it's changed its nature. But a lot of people get into the corporation thing and go to Bouvier's 1854, and the United States government is a corporation. The state governments are corporations. A corporation is just a non-living entity for the benefit of people who set it up. It's got to have officers in it. That's all it is. Okay, James Madison says, knowledge will forever govern ignorance. And a people who mean to be their own governors, if we want to be our own governors, we must arm ourselves with the power which knowledge gives. Again, I want to go to the concept of body politic, political bodies. In 1777, that period, these two flags flew upon the soil of North Carolina, each one representing a different political view over the same people, right? This flag flew over Pennsylvania. This flag flew over Pennsylvania. This flag flew over New York. This flag flew over New York. The people had to decide which political body am I going to align myself with. Okay? So flags represent political views. If you see the German flag, the GDR, German Democratic Republic, the, what is it, black and yellow and whatever?
Red.
It's red. Black, yellow, red. Okay, does that represent a political view of the German people? Or does it represent the government or what? What about the red flag with the swastika in the middle? They represent political views. The people are the same. It represents a political view. So the American people in this country could choose, I like the crown, I like that political view, or, hey, these guys have something going on too. You get to pick. So that's a body politic. The body politic that created this and organized under this form of government is not the same body politic, not the same political belief system. Does this represent the political views of the founders, or does this one? I mean, it's just that simple. And it's this did. Most of y'all probably seen me do this part of it. This is Senate Report 93-549. And what we want to see here, and we'll switch gears, is we're operating under an emergency. This is a Senate report that came out in 1973, and the very first sentence says this: a majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have, in varying degrees, been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. And in the United States, actions taken by the government in times of great crisis have, from at least the Civil War, in important ways shaped the present phenomenon of a permanent state of national emergency. This came out in 1973. I graduated high school in 75. How many people were taught this in school?
No.
Can you solve a problem if you don't even know it exists?
No.
Okay, so what we got to do, we got to uncover a problem to figure out how to solve it. Because right now we have lots of people in America trying to solve this problem of the federal government out of control. They're doing the best they can, but they're operating backwards. They're operating from today, saying, hey, you're out of control here, you need to do this. Or they're saying, you know what, y'all created the Social Security Act in 1933, or the bankruptcy of there, or the Federal Reserve Act, or the, whatever. And we work backwards. How did they get control over us? Oh, Social Security number, that's how they got us. And we're working backwards, and we're coming to all the wrong conclusions. We got to go from the beginning and work up and see where we lost it. Now this right here says, a majority of people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. Okay, what's emergency rule? Government operates in one of two modes: peacetime or emergency.
War powers.
Peacetime or emergency. Varying degrees of emergency. It could be full-fledged war powers. It could be other lesser emergency. What it basically means is it's either peacetime or that for some reason some of your rights have to be taken from you. Okay? Some of the constitutional rights have to be abridged, gone over the top of. And it says and in the United States, actions taken by the government in times of great crisis have, from at least the Civil War, in important ways, shaped the present phenomenon of a permanent state of national emergency. So this gives us something to point at. So something's been going on from at least the Civil War. And a lot of people today look to 1932, or they look to the Federal Reserve Act, and they're not looking to where something huge took place. Here's another page. This is page 184 of the Senate report, and it's just talking about it. I want you to listen to this. It says, and it's just talking about this condition, this emergency condition. It says, the President, with the approval of Congress, has thus used as authority for extraordinary actions laws which have no real relationship whatsoever to existing circumstances. As a consequence, a national emergency is now a practical necessity in order to carry out what has become the regular and normal method of governmental action. What were intended by Congress as delegations of power to be used only in the most extreme situations, and for the most limited durations, have become everyday powers, and the state of emergency has become a permanent condition. What's that telling you? The suspension of the Constitution, to some degree, and if you can suspend one part, you can't suspend it all, is a permanent condition. Is this what was set up by our founders? Where the Constitution could just be permanently run over the top of? Yeah, and was that a respectable source to cite? United States Senate report. You know, who was on this Senate report? Charles Mathias, Frank Church, Adlai Stevenson III were on this Senate committee for that report. Were those junior statesmen at the time, or were those the heavy hitters? This is not some junior report. Then you have the Republican Governors Conference of 1994, they call it the Williamsburg Resolve, and it says this: here and in other colonial capitals, the nation's founders first debated the idea of independence and the fundamental principles of freedom. Then the challenge to the liberties of the people came from an arrogant, overbearing monarchy across the sea. Today, that challenge comes from our own federal government, a government that has defied and that now ignores virtually every constitutional limit fashioned by the framers to confine its reach and thus guard the freedoms of the people. Okay, it says that the federal government defies and ignores virtually every constitutional limit. What's the fundamental law of the land upon which no law can violate?
Constitution.
The Constitution. Okay, what does it say the federal government does? It says they ignore it. They ignore the law. They defy the law. What do they call you if you ignore the law or defy the law?
A criminal.
A criminal. So now we've got an issue of, if we've got a government that will not obey the law, what's our duty? How did that situation get created? And then what do we do about that situation? Unconstitutional act. Okay? If you have any act that violates the Constitution, it's called an unconstitutional act. This is just a definition. It says an unconstitutional act is not a law. So if we can find anything, we're going to start looking for unconstitutional acts. Okay? Way back in the past, not the ones they're doing now, 140 years ago. An unconstitutional act is not a law. It confers no rights. It imposes no duties. You have no duty to obey an unconstitutional act. It affords no protection. It creates no office. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though it had never been passed. Therefore, an unconstitutional act purporting to create an office gives no validity to the acts of persons acting under color of its authority. So if you can find an unconstitutional act, and someone says, I get power from an unconstitutional act, in law, do they have power?
Nope.
Now, in actuality, do they have power because other people recognize that, hey, I'm going to do what this guy says. But does it make it lawful? And who's going to hold these people's feet to the fire? Okay, with a government and the people, there's supposed to be a reciprocal agreement. Okay, universally recognized reciprocal agreement. The very first sentence of North Carolina says it, and then also a U.S. Supreme Court case says it. And it basically says this: whereas allegiance and protection are in their nature reciprocal, and the one of right should be refused when the other is withdrawn. And then in the Supreme Court case it says, there arise universally recognized reciprocal duties of protection by the state and of allegiance and support by the citizen. Let's tear this apart. What is the relationship between the people and the government? Why do we create government?
Protect our rights.
Protect our rights. to protect our rights. Protection. And what can they demand in return for that? Allegiance and support. My allegiance, war comes, hey, come join the military, support in taxation. Okay? They can demand it. When you have, and it's supposed to be a balance. I would say now it's out of balance. Okay? But it says, and let's just read this, whereas allegiance and protection are in their nature reciprocal, and the one of right should be refused when the other is withdrawn. When the government refuses to protect your rights, do you have an obligation to allegiance and support? In law. No. You have no obligation. There is no legal obligation. Now, is it prudent? Sometimes, because they put a gun to your head. It's like, well, what do I do here? Doesn't make it lawful. Man, that's just showing the balance of those two, and we don't need to go there. What has changed in America? As people's belief systems, commonly called a worldview, originally this nation had a Christian belief system. You can't learn it by public education today. And our belief system was handed down from a parent to the child. Nowadays, do our beliefs come from our own families or from governmental indoctrination and political correctness? Who's teaching our children?
Government.
Right. Is that the way it was set up?
Nope.
No, it wasn't. Whose duty is it to fix this? Ours. Have we been, as a people, successfully socially engineered? Absolutely.
Yes.
As a people. Not as in every individual, but as a people on whole. Because we have people now, how many people 20, 25 years ago would have, in their wildest dream, wildest dream, ever contemplated the concept of gay marriage? Never happened in the history of the world. Never happened. And now it's a self-evident right that it's just, man, you're crazy people if you don't think we ought to have this concept. And it's like, well, where did it come from? Did it come from the parents, or did it come from, is it a belief system that the government is pushing down and teaching these kids in school and bringing them up in, and then the media and Hollywood and things of this nature? They're taking our children from us, people. They're teaching your children to be against you and your beliefs. John Adams said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Americans are screaming for a return to our foundations as a country. And we say it all the time, the Tea Party, hey, we want to get back. We got James Madison, we got Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. The problem is lots of Americans don't believe in our foundation anymore.
Exactly.
We want to go back to it, but we don't believe. Well, they're a bunch of racist, slave-holding, ignorant, right-wing radicals who kind of believed in God. Some of them were hardcore. It's like they were. It's crazy what they teach, and they've been basically our children been educated or indoctrinated into despising our founding principles. So how can you go back to a foundation you're taught to despise? You can't. It only gives you a new direction to go in. And I'm here to say that Washington, I've got them figured out, Washington wants to give us a new freedom. They want to make us freer than we've ever been in our lives, and it's led by the Democratic Party. How many people believe that? It's a new freedom.
They promote it.
It's a freedom that Janis Joplin talks about. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. When you have nothing left to lose, you'll be free. And they're working to make us free. But that's not the type of freedom I want. That's not the type of freedom this country was founded on.
Remember that song?
Did Americans have a Christian foundation? I don't need to go through a bunch of these. I'll just do a couple of them. Here's Delaware's Constitution of 1776. Because we're taught that we didn't have a Christian foundation. It says, every person who shall be chosen a member of either house, appointed to any office of trust, has to take this declaration, this oath. This is your oath of office. I, so-and-so, do profess faith in God the Father and in Jesus Christ, His only Son, and the Holy Ghost, one God, blessed forevermore. And I do acknowledge the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration.
Yeah.
Can that be allowed in any state constitution today? Does that go against our foundation? that it can't be allowed in a constitution today? How did we get rid of it? We're going to go over all that. Constitution of South Carolina, Article 38, says the Christian Protestant religion shall be deemed and is hereby constituted and declared to be the established religion of the state. I mean, go look it up. These are what's out there. North Carolina. No person who shall deny the being of God or the truth of the Protestant religion or the divine authority of either the Old or New Testaments, or who shall hold religious principles incompatible with the freedom and safety of the state, shall be capable of holding any office or place of trust or profit in the civil department within this state. Now, does this mean non-Christians can't vote? No. It just means non-Christians can't hold office. Because man, where does law, we got to get into this concept of where does law come from? Does law come from God, or does law come from man? Because these are two worldviews. Remember I talked about worldviews have changed? It used to be we were limited. Government was limited in what kind of laws it could pass based upon what God's law said. But if you get God out of there, then who is the ultimate lawmaker? Man. And now we have humanism. And what controls humanism? The humanists will say, well, we were all born good, inherently good, and we all have a common belief system. All cultures have a common belief system. You know, you don't kill, you don't steal. Is that true? You know, we're told that. Okay, we don't kill. Murder's wrong. Would everyone say that's kind of a universally accepted, goes across cultural lines? Yeah. What about abortion?
Right. Unless it's done through
Well, now we got definitions. And all of a sudden you find that this concept, that there's this universally recognized belief system that all humans are born with, is a lie. The universally recognized belief system that every person is born with is, I want what you have. And
Mine is mine, but yours is mine.
that's it. That's how we're born. And you have to put limits on that natural belief and natural direction. And this nation was free under God, originally set up as free under God's laws. Remember James Madison, this form of government is for a religious people. We're limited. We've got this cap over us of what we can and can't do. God says you can't go outside of here, so we couldn't go outside of here. But when you take God off, what's the limit? What laws are we going to have tomorrow? What are we going to have? What laws are our children going to have? Are guys going to be able to marry two women, and the women that he's married to can have a lesbian marriage underneath all in the same? As long as you don't hurt anybody, it doesn't make any difference, according to what they say today. It's like the perversion in the direction can go anywhere because there is no limit. It is freedom regardless of God. I want to be able to do what I want to do, how I want to do it. And if that's the government you want, we already have it.
Right.
You don't need to start something new. We've got a godless government who's making everything free and taking away everything from the people they don't like.
Right.
And I could just keep going with that. Don't have time. We got a lot of information to go over. A lot of people tell us, this is another big lie we get, that, well, I'm not going to be part of a religious government. More people die in wars because of religion than in the Christian religion than anything else out there. I mean, has anyone heard that? Have you ever looked it up? Look it up. These are the deaths due to war from 1000 AD to the present. 50 to 60 million in World War II. Was that a religious war? I don't think it was. 30 to 60 million in the Mongol conquest, Genghis Khan. Was that a Christian religious war? 25 million in the Manchu conquest of Ming China. 1616 to 1640. 20 million in the Taiping Rebellion in China. Chinese had a tough time. 15 to 20 million World War I. 17 million Timur Lenk conquest. And that was Islamic. 10 million in the Sino-Chinese War, 1931 to 42. So this is really before World War II, what the Japanese did in China, the rape of Nanking and that stuff. And finally, you get Christian. Now, we're at 7.5 million right here with the 30 Years' War, and that was the Catholics between the Catholics and the Protestants, if you know about Reformation and all these things, there was lots of issues going on there of who had control and state control and all sorts of issues. But then you go to 6 million, the Chinese War, and just keep going down this list: Korea, Vietnam, Second Congo War, Indochina War, Afghanistan War. And then you got right down here 1 million, and this is the Aztec conquest. You know, when Cortez went over there, that was the Catholics doing that. Then you got this whole column. Then you get to the Northern Ireland conflicts. Then you go to individual things like over here's the Crusades. 60 to 100,000 in the First Crusade, the sack of Jerusalem. Now, isn't this war right here, this the Crusaders, isn't that what we're, I mean, that was supposed to be like, we're going out there killing everybody. The guesstimate is 60 to 100,000. Now, the Crusades lasted for a little over 100 years, and there were like 9 of them, 7 of them, 9 of them. And so the actual number is higher than that, but most of the time, if you look at the Crusades, most of the time they went out there, they went out with 20,000 knights, and they died of starvation and kind of had to just kind of come back. And they killed themselves. And then you got, you know, the Holy Inquisition. We hear about the Inquisition in Spain? 15,000. So does it look to you that if you went under a Christian moral government, what are the odds that you're not going to kill a bunch of people? Now let's just look at this. Murders of civilians by secular humanist governments. Governments that deny God. Soviet Union killed 61 million of their own people. China 35 million. Germany 20 million. Japan 6 million. Cambodia, Khmer Rouge 2 million. North Korea, Yugoslavia. And the United States, actually I need to update that. I think we're around 50 million right now. Now that we've gone godless, we killed 50 million. Allow it. It's the law. Don't stop it. It's called abortion. In America, we have perfected the concept of rationalized hypocrisy, believing that two opposed views are equally right. Abortion is just, abortion is murder. How do you hold those two concepts? We're free, but we're enslaved. Right here is something I like to do. This is a belief system because it's very popular out there that people say that I can do anything I want as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, and that's what government should be about. And let's just go to this. This is a belief system, and let's just read through it and just mentally listen to this and just check off what you agree with, what you disagree with. Like if we were to put government back in place today, is this a model we ought to work off of? It says man has a right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has a right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. From Central America to America. You got it right. Man has a right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, and to dress as he will. How many people agree with that? Don't raise your hands. You'll be totally embarrassed. But a lot of people, if I don't forewarn them, and I can talk this up just the opposite way of, hey, I'll get people raising their hands. But where did this come from? What did I just cite you? I cited a poem that I got off of a website, and I left one sentence off of it. The website was the First Church of Satan Frequently Asked Questions. It says, do Satanists have a moral code? And I just read to you the Satanist moral code. Because the world's about me as a Satanist. It's me, not God, me. There is no God. I am the God. The sentence I left off is, there is no God but man, is the first sentence of this poem. Which isn't that what a humanist want? Isn't that what these people who deny God want? There is no God but man. Man is the highest form of life here. And I don't have time to read a lot of these. Here you go. This is on the, he who believes in nothing will fall for anything. This is off the frequently asked questions. It says, Satanism promotes individual sovereignty. Do you hear that in this movement? Satanism promotes individual sovereignty. Is that what this nation was founded on? No, it's not. The belief that every man or woman is the center of his own universe. Satanists live by their own rules and accept responsibilities for their action. We encourage anyone to read and study before committing to any religion. visit more than one ritual, from more than one priest, try more than one tradition. This is probably the only religion you're going to find where you can honestly say it is all about you. What can I do to advance the cause of Satanism? Again, these are frequently asked questions on this website. Whether you care to admit it or not, the next generation of Satanists will be the social activists or civil libertarians. Sooner or later, Satanism will have its equivalent of a Rosa Parks. Civil libertarians, social activists who deny God and say that they are supreme. Satanism, okay, what is your position concerning stratification? I don't need to give it. Yeah, I think I will read. Satanism exalts man as God and declares the Satanist to be Belial, which is without a master or sovereign. Okay, so Satanist says each individual is a sovereign. I say to each man and woman, you're unique and sovereign, the center of the universe. However right I may be in thinking as I do, you may be equally right in thinking otherwise. Anybody ever heard this concept? You can only accomplish your object in life by a complete disregard of the opinions of other people. Do people go out there and promote ideas that are very unpopular and they're just motivated? The gay marriage. I mean, do you think that was real easy for those guys to go out in the streets and start pushing their agenda? But they did it with a complete disregard of the opinions of other people. They were pushing their agenda. The Hispanics pushed their agenda. The illegal immigrants pushed, well, the same thing. Illegal immigrants pushed their agenda. When are we going to push our agenda?
With the same passion.
With the same passion.
Yep.
With a complete disregard of the labels they're going to stick on us. Because that's what we're afraid of. They're going to call me a radical. They're going to call... You think I've been called a name or two? You think I care? Humanism. Humanistic philosophy viewed as a non-theistic or religion antagonistic to traditional religion. Secular humanism is a humanist philosophy that upholds reason, ethics, and justice, and specifically rejects the supernatural and the spiritual as a basis of moral reflection and decision-making. Okay? So they uphold reason, ethics, and justice. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? The issue is whose reason, ethics, and justice? Beliefs have consequences, people. If you have a belief, something goes along with it. I think I just said that. Secular humanism is a humanist philosophy that upholds reason, ethics, and justice. The question arises, whose reason, ethics, and justice? What about Sam Rivera's? Now, what about his reason, ethics, and justice? Here's a secular humanist, doesn't believe in religion and government. Is this who we're going to uphold as being, this reason, ethics, and justice? Because we don't want those we don't want those Christians. We'll take him instead. Or maybe Mao. Do you agree with his reason, ethics, and justice? Well, what about Stalin? Now, his reason, I'm grabbing some secular humanists that we don't want religion and government. We want God out of it. We want man to be God, and we want to live under man's law. As a people nowadays, we think that's nirvana. Now the one that tends to make everyone uncomfortable. What about his reason, ethics, and justice? How many people here believe that the public education system gives a good education? But how many people believe what the public education system says about him? Oh, they got it right with this guy. You think that's true?
No, not anymore.
The victor writes his story. Or, the other way is, the victor writes history, which is his story. And what we want to do is let's look at the other side of history. Let's look at the other side of Lincoln. We all know the side that's promoted. I mean, I don't need to go over that. This is a God. This is America's God. This is America's deity. He should be sainted. I mean, this guy was so good. We should be worshiping this man. Well, no. We already do. We got a temple to him.
Yeah.
How do they confuse us? How do they teach history? How do they pull this over on us? I mean, aren't we all intelligent people here? How did we get duped?
We didn't.
So you know the true history?
Yes. About Lincoln? Just
No,
about-
I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about everything.
No, but we in this room haven't been duped by this propaganda.
No, were you duped before you got into this room?
No, I wasn't.
Wow.
I was.
Who won the Civil War?
Nobody.
That's wrong.
Bankers.
Washington. The District of Columbia won the war. Congress won the war.
The Rothschild.
Who lost the war?
People.
All the people.
They do know more than most people.
Y'all do know more. Yeah,
When you
that's
ask
right.
that question.
But what I want to do is show
Pat yourself
how.
on the back a little bit.
Yeah, how do people get deceived? Is what is the direction I'm going at? Because people are deceived,
By government.
and I'm going to give some examples. I don't want to get into a lot of debate here. I'm going to give some examples. If we want to debate, I'll be glad to come up here and spend a couple of days in several months from now, but not now. This is from a 1929 history book. And this is on the Civil War. And you see it's color-coded here. And it says slaveholding states which seceded before. Yeah. Slaveholding states which seceded before April 15th, 1861, which is Fort Sumter, which is these deep south states here, the Gulf states. Then you have another code, slaveholding states which seceded after April 15th, which was Fort Sumter, which is going to be Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. So when Fort Sumter was fired on, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia were still in the Union. We had not seceded. And you know Virginia wasn't. Why? How do we have evidence Virginia hadn't seceded yet? Who was offered command of the military? The United States military. Robert E. Lee was offered the command of the military to put down the rebellion of these deep south states. Because Virginia had not seceded yet. And then you have this one's highlighted, slaveholding states which did not secede, which are going to be Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. 5 states. Well, Virginia's that weird thing. But 4 real states and West Virginia didn't secede. So you have 5 states, 5 slave states that fought for the North. 11 seceded. 30% of the slave states fought for the North. Does that go along with the concept most people are taught?
No.
If people were taught that, because isn't this is a history book. If they're taught it this clear, this is how they taught it in 1929. Slaveholding states which did not secede. How do they teach this now? Do they teach it that clear that people, when they're done with the history class, they know what happened?
No.
They
Most
call
of us-
these the border states.
Most of us know that the Emancipation Proclamation did not apply to those states.
And more than that.
They don't teach history in school.
Okay.
They teach social studies.
There you go.
But again, this is this book right here. Same thing. This is Wall Builders. How many people here are familiar with David Barton? He's been on Glenn Beck. This is his publication. This is Wall Builders. I'm going to get on David a little bit. I've met him, I've talked with him, and didn't agree with him on a couple things. How do we get this concept of Lincoln? How do we get to believe, or how does the masses get to believe all this about Lincoln? This is in this book right here. You can look at it if you want. Please don't take it. It says this: President Lincoln was so pleased with the abolition of slavery that he personally signed the 13th Amendment, which is the one that abolished slavery. The Constitution does not require the approval of the President or for the passage of an amendment, and the 13th Amendment is the only one of the 27 amendments to be signed by a President. Lincoln's signature, because he signed this, his signature, now read this, they're giving commentary of what this means. Lincoln's signature was indicative both of his strong opposition to slavery and of his joy at the ending of that evil. Okay, so that's what that's what David Barton wrote right here.
That's wrong.
Well, all that's true, well, except for the commentary.
Well, Mr.
Let me-
Lincoln did.
Let me keep going.
He wouldn't free a slave if it saved the Union.
I know all that. You're not going to teach me one thing about Abraham Lincoln and slavery I don't already know. But let's go to another publication. This is Foundations of Freedom, Constitution and Bill of Rights. This is one of those little pocket constitutions. And it says this. It's got this section in it which has proposed amendments to the Constitution not ratified by the states. And it has this commentary. It says, during the second session of the 36th Congress on March 2nd, 1861, the following proposed amendment to the Constitution relating to slavery was signed by the President. The President was Lincoln. He signed this one also. It says, it is interesting to note, now this is only 2 proposed amendments. You've got to remember, the 13th Amendment wasn't ratified until December of 1865. Lincoln was shot in April. So he signed it when it was still a proposed amendment.
Not
Okay.
true. The first 13th Amendment was ratified.
I'm not going into the first 13th Amendment with titles of nobility. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. We don't have time to get into all these little nuances. We just don't have time. Okay, so we got this 13th Amendment is, and I don't mean to be rude, but it's just, we've really got to stay focused here. Is Lincoln signed 2 proposed amendments. The one we're getting ready to talk about, and the one that abolished slavery. But slavery wasn't abolished until after he was dead. So he signed them both when they were proposed amendments. One passed, one didn't. And we're going to read about the signature of this other one and what this other amendment that he signed said. Because remember, by him signing it, it shows his support, his happiness for what it's proposing. Right? It says, it is interesting to note in this connection that this is the only proposed amendment to the Constitution ever signed by the President. The President's signature is considered unnecessary because of the Constitution's provision that it's all done by Congress. And the original 13th Amendment says this, or the proposed 13th Amendment says this. No amendment shall be made to the Constitution which will authorize or give to Congress the power to abolish or interfere within any state with the domestic institutions thereof, including that of persons held to labor or service by the laws of said state. So you have a proposed amendment that's going to make slavery permanent and irrevocable. Abraham Lincoln signed that one too.
He signed wow.
He signed it. And not only that, I'm going to take it a step further. In his very first inaugural, remember that amendment was proposed March 2nd, 1861. He's inaugurated March 4th, 1861, 2 days later. This is Abraham Lincoln's handwriting. This is his first inaugural address, his handwriting. I've got some words I'm going to superimpose directly over his words of this paragraph right here. And it says this. I understand a proposed amendment to the Constitution, the one we just read, has passed Congress to the effect that the federal government shall never interfere with the domestic institutions of the states, including that of persons held to service. To avoid misconstruction of what I have said, I depart from my purpose not to speak of a particular amendment, so as far as to say that holding such a provision to be now implied constitutional law, I have no objection to its being made express and irrevocable. Abraham Lincoln's handwriting 2 days after that amendment was proposed. In his first inaugural address that you can go look up on the internet, and it's in there. And I didn't add it there. It was already there. How many people here are familiar with Abraham Lincoln's logic and reasoning for the Civil War? Because he had to convince Congress to go to war. He had to convince volunteers from Vermont, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania to fight. Let's look at Abraham Lincoln's reasoning for waging an all-out war of subjugation, death, and destruction upon several states. And this is given in a special session before Congress, July 4th, 1861. So he called a special session, and this is his reasoning. Now let's just see if we agree with Lincoln, and therefore the modern interpretation, his modern interpretation of America's founding. Abraham Lincoln said this: they, the southern states, invented an ingenious sophism. What is sophism? It's an argument apparently correct in form, but actually invalid, especially an argument used to deceive, or sophistry is subtly deceptive reasoning or argumentation. So he's saying that the southern states invented this deceptive reasoning and argument called secession. Okay, so I just want to put that in context. They, the southern states, invented an ingenious sophism. The sophism itself is that any state of the Union may consistently with the national constitution and therefore lawfully and peacefully withdraw from the Union without the consent of the Union or of any other state. So he's arguing that once in, you can't get out. The only way to get out is the consent of the other states. Not your consent. Now, doesn't all government right come from the consent of self-consent? Not your consent or your consent? But Let's just take this long. Here's Abraham Lincoln's speech to the House of Representatives, January 12, 1848. His handwriting. We got Abraham Lincoln's handwriting here again. Let's go over it. Right here is what this says. Any people anywhere being inclined. Now this is for the Texas secession from Mexico. The Alamo and all this. This is what's going on this time. Everybody know their history about Texas? What happened? Texas was Mexico. It was part of Mexico. Mexico opened the borders. Learn from this. They opened the borders to immigration. And then they said, whoa, these Americans, too many are moving here and grabbing this free land we got to offer. We're going to shut the borders down and not allow immigration anymore. And what did the Texans say? No. It's ours now. And they fought for it and won their independence. Tells you a little bit about open borders. But he said this. Any people anywhere being inclined and having the power have the right to rise up. And he underlined right. See it right there? It's underlined. They have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and to form a new one that suits them better. This is a most valuable, a most sacred right. If it's a right, are you supposed to fight for it? If it's a right, it's yours. A right which we hope and believe is to liberate the world. So he thought that in 1848. 12 years later, 13 years later, he thinks something totally different now. Okay, it's secession in the Declaration of Independence. What is secession? The formal withdrawal from an organization. Formally withdrawing. I'm out of here. I'm leaving. Declaration of Independence says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, sounds like separation to me, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and God's law entitle to them. The Declaration of Independence, is that not the formal withdrawal from under the crown? Yeah. The Declaration of Independence is an indictment against the crown. Remember I talked about the reciprocal agreement, protection and allegiance? They're saying, you're not protecting our rights. We are and of right ought to be a free and independent people because, and here's a list of your crimes that you've committed, which gives us the right to formally leave from you. Secede. Because secession is just a formal withdrawal from an organization. Nothing more than that. It says that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. They're absolved from all allegiance. They are free and independent states. They're independent states. I mean, is it in the Declaration that we are leaving? We are formally leaving you. It's the right of the people to alter or abolish a form of government. It's their right to alter, abolish, institute new government. Lincoln says that's not in there. You know? Secession is an ingenious sophism. The seceders insist that our Constitution admits of secession. I just went over the Declaration. Well, let's see what the Constitution says. How many people understand how we went from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution? We originally were organized under the Articles of Confederation. Let's say this is the Articles of Confederation. 13 states. In order to amend this, what kind of vote had to take place in order to amend it? Unanimous. In order to make any change in the Articles of Confederation, not half, not 3/4, 2/3, unanimous. 13. All 13 had to vote to amend this Articles of Confederation. Well, every time they came together saying, hey, we need to work out something, Rhode Island wouldn't show up. Could they amend it? No. So what did they do? They proposed the Constitution, and I know I don't want all the arguments about it was done in secrecy and all that stuff. I already know all that. But they proposed the Constitution. They sent this Constitution to the states, 13 states. And Article 7 of the Constitution that's out there today says this. Now, they're organized under this. They're proposing this. This one, the Constitution says, the ratification of the conventions of 9 of these states over here shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between who? The states so ratified. Did we switch from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution and say we're just changing our form of government? Or did we secede from one, withdraw, once 9, because once 9 say, hey, we're getting this one, what happens to the other 4? Are they required to come over? Well, let's look at it. Let's look at the timeline. The prescribed method of secession, well, this is the southern states timeline. I think right after this I'll go into the other timeline. Says, here's what the South did. Here's what the southern states did. Article 7 of the Constitution says the ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of the Constitution or a new form of government. South Carolina held a convention December 20th, 1861. They voted to leave. Florida held a convention. Alabama held a convention. Georgia held a convention. They're all following the exact same method that Article 7 of the Constitution prescribed. Does the Constitution and Declaration admit to a secession? And of course, is Lincoln himself considered secession a most sacred right, a right which he hoped and believed would liberate the world? Yeah, he said that at one time, but then later he didn't believe it. Do you agree with Lincoln's reason and logic that secession was an ingenious sophism and was not in our history and documents? Oh, here's where we're going to go further on Article 7. This sophism, Lincoln said, derives much, perhaps the whole of its currency, from the assumption that there is some omnipotent and sacred supremacy pertaining to a state, to each state or federal union, no one of them ever having been a state out of the union. This is the logic for waging this war that we're not allowed to talk about unless we say it's about slavery. Okay, Article 7, we talk about secession, formal withdrawal. Article 7, the ratification of 9 states. That was the process. Now, here's the timeline I was talking about a second ago. Here's how we went from this form of government to this one, or whichever way I had it. This one to this one. 9 states. Here's the dates that each one of them held a convention and voted to adopt the Constitution. You had 9 on June 21st, 1788. At that time, the Constitution goes into effect. But because of distances and not knowing, getting word around that we've adopted, now we got to figure out a time and a place to meet to inaugurate this new government. Okay, so it takes a little bit of time. And in that time, Virginia and New York adopted the Constitution. By the time they voted to inaugurate the new government, on February 4th, 1789, George Washington is elected president. March 4th, 1789, the United States government meets for the first time and George Washington is inaugurated. So the government actually takes effect March 4th, 1789, with 11 states. 2 states are out of the Union, one of which is North Carolina. It held out until November 21st, 1789, 8 months. And then Rhode Island, who just never got along with, could figure out much, they stayed out for a year and 2 months. Lincoln just made the argument that no state was ever out of the Union. Were 2 states clearly out of the Union? It's inaugurated right there. These 2 states aren't in it.
Well, I think you have to agree that was rather interesting. Mr. Ainsworth has done a tremendous amount of research on the subject that he spoke of, and what I think you'll discover is that things aren't really the way that you may have perceived them through the public education system, the truth of the matter as to what happened and some of the quotes by some of the players of the day. So next week, folks, we will continue with our final chapter on this. This will be part 2. And as always, we are very thankful that you take time from your busy day to watch our program. And as always, we remind you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.